Boss bullies his worker at factory. The worker snapped his arm in rage. Kieran Moss had always been the type of person who faded into the background, standing barely 5'6" with a slight frame that made his work clothes hang loose. He moved through Thornfield manufacturing like a ghost. His dark hair fell across his forehead, helping him avoid eye contact, and his quiet voice rarely rose above the machinery's hum. 3 months into his job on the factory floor, most people barely noticed him, except when they needed someone to blame for a missed quota. The Thornfield plant stretched across 12 acres outside Cleveland, its red brick walls stained with decades of grime. Inside, the production floor echoed with hydraulic presses and conveyor belts. Kieran worked Assembly Line C, installing circuit boards with methodical precision. The work suited him, repetitive, solitary, requiring focus rather than social interaction. But Vance Kruger had other plans. Vance stood 6'3", with the build of someone who'd played high school football and never let anyone forget it. As floor supervisor, he wore authority like a badge, his thick neck supporting a perpetually red head, small eyes above a twice-broken nose, constantly scanned for weakness. In Kieran, he'd found the perfect target. "Hey, Mouse!" Vance's voice boomed across the factory during shift change. Kieran kept his head down, ignoring the nickname that had stuck after his first week. "Your station's running behind again." Kieran glanced up from his workbench where circuit boards awaited installation. His quota numbers were actually the highest on the floor, but correcting Vance would make things worse. "I'll pick up the pace," he said quietly. "You'll pick up the pace?" Vance mimicked Kieran's soft tone, drawing snickers from his crew. Rick Bannister, heavy-set with tree-trunk arms, and Dylan Torres, whose cruel smile revealed a gold tooth, flanked their supervisor like attack dogs. "How about you pick up your pathetic attitude?" Other workers, Maria Santos, Jake Patterson, old Pete Kowalski, kept their eyes on their stations. Everyone had bills to pay. Getting involved wasn't worth losing a job. What none of them knew was that Kieran Moss had spent 8 years in the Army Rangers, including 2 tours overseas, where quiet observation and swift action had kept his unit alive. The slight frame concealed a body honed by combat training. His soft voice masked a mind that could assess and neutralize threats with surgical precision. But civilian life meant different rules, and Kieran had sworn he'd left that life behind. The first major incident happened during lunch in the cafeteria. Kieran sat alone, eating a sandwich, while reading a worn paperback. The cafeteria buzzed with conversation and clatter under harsh fluorescent lights. "Well, if it isn't our favorite Mouse." Vance's shadow fell across Kieran's book. Behind him, Rick cracked knuckles while Dylan grinned. "What you reading, college boy?" "Just a book." "Just a book," Vance repeated, snatching it away. He squinted at the cover. "The Count of Monte Cristo." "Look at this, boys. Mouse thinks he's intellectual." He flipped pages mockingly. "Maybe I should help with your reading comprehension." Before Kieran could react, Vance tore the book in half with a sharp rip that echoed across the suddenly quiet cafeteria. Pages fluttered like wounded birds. The entire room went silent, dozens of eyes watching. Kieran's hands tightened into fists. In his mind, he could see exactly how it would go. A strike to Vance's solar plexus, knee to his face, Rick next, but size made him slow. Dylan would run. 30 seconds, all 3 on the ground. Instead, Kieran stood slowly and began picking up torn pages. "It's okay," he said quietly. "I was almost finished anyway." The cafeteria erupted in nervous laughter. Vance beamed while his crew celebrated. As Kieran gathered the last pages, he caught sight of Emma Rodriguez watching from across the room. She worked quality control, petite, with intelligent brown eyes and black hair pulled back practically. Unlike others, her expression held sympathy rather than amusement. That afternoon, Vance escalated, During shift change, he accidentally bumped Kieran while carrying black coffee, sending hot liquid splashing across Kieran's shirt and vest. The coffee was scalding. "Oops," Vance said with mock concern. "Mouse had an accident. Maybe he should be more careful." Rick and Dylan doubled over laughing, while others pretended not to notice. Kieran stood dripping with coffee, steam rising from his shirt, and said nothing. He walked to clean up, passing Emma's station where she watched with concern. The pattern continued for weeks. Vance assigned Kieran the heaviest lifting despite his build, then criticized slowness. He scheduled worst shifts and dirtiest jobs, grease traps, defective parts, overtime while others went home. When Kieran completed tasks without complaint, Vance found new humiliations. One evening, finishing a late shift alone, Emma appeared at his station. She glanced around nervously before speaking. "You don't have to take this," she said softly. "What Vance is doing, it's not right." Kieran looked up from his assembly. Up close, Emma was prettier than he'd noticed. Her concern seemed genuine, which made it dangerous. "I can handle it," he said. "Can you? From where I sit, it looks like he's trying to push you out." Emma moved closer, lowering her voice. "I've seen this before. He picks someone, makes their life miserable until they quit." "Why are you telling me this?" Emma hesitated. "Because you seem like a good person, and because I think you're stronger than you let people see." Their eyes met, and Kieran felt warmth shift in his chest. But footsteps echoed, and Emma quickly moved away as security made rounds. That weekend, Kieran thought about Emma's words while going through his apartment routine. The one bedroom was sparse but clean, an American flag from service, a unit photo, and in the closet, a heavy bag hanging from reinforced ceiling mount. He'd bought the bag when he moved to Cleveland, calling it exercise, but now, wrapping his hands and working through combinations, he realized he'd been preparing. His body moved with fluid precision. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. Each strike landed with devastating accuracy. Kieran had learned to fight where hesitation meant death. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez taught him size didn't matter with leverage and will. A small wolf can take down a big dog if the wolf knows what it is. But this wasn't Afghanistan. This was civilian life, where punching meant assault charges and losing everything. So Kieran had buried that part, choosing tolerance over retaliation. Monday brought new cruelty. Vance had spent the weekend planning. As Kieran clocked in, his station had been moved to the floor's center, surrounded by other stations where everyone could watch. A handwritten sign on his chair read, "Mouse House." "Thought you might like a social workspace," Vance announced. "Maybe being around real workers will teach productivity." Throughout morning, Vance visited Kieran's station every 20 minutes, timing with a stopwatch and shaking his head dramatically. 14 seconds per unit. Corporate standard is 12. Mouse needs remedial training. During lunch, harassment turned darker. Kieran was eating at his corner table when Vance approached with his crew and several workers. "You know what, Mouse? I've been thinking about your performance issues." Vance's voice carried across the cafeteria. "Maybe you're just not factory material. Maybe you should find work suited to your delicate nature." Rick laughed loudly. "Yeah, like filing papers." "Or the ladies' restroom," Dylan added, sending the group into hysterics. Kieran felt heat rise as conversation stopped. Everyone was watching. Emma sat 2 tables away, her face tight with anger, but outnumbered and outranked. "I'm just trying to do my job," Kieran said evenly. "Your job?" Vance leaned down, face inches away. His breath smelled of cigarettes and stale coffee. "Your job is whatever I say. And right now, I say entertain us. Where'd you come from before crawling into our factory?" Kieran's training screamed warnings. Vance was establishing dominance through public humiliation, using the crowd as witnesses. The smart play was de-escalation. "I moved here from Columbus, needed work." "Columbus?" Vance straightened, grinning. "Big city boy, huh?" That explains the soft hands and prissy attitude. Bet you never done real work. The crowd laughed on cue. Kieran noticed how many avoided his eyes, ashamed but unwilling to risk attention. Only Emma met his gaze, her expression apologetic and frustrated. Matter of fact, I bet Mouse has never been in a real fight. Probably runs away at trouble's first sign. Ain't that right? Kieran looked at his hands, calloused from military training and factory work, scarred from combat and accidents. If Vance only knew what these hands had done. Yeah, Kieran said softly, I avoid trouble. The crowd laughed harder. As laughter died and people returned to lunch, Kieran noticed Emma shaking her head, disappointment visible across the room. That afternoon brought the worst incident yet. Kieran was working when Vance appeared with Rick and Dylan, plus a clipboard and official inspection form. Random quality check, Mouse, Vance announced loudly. Corporate's asking about Line C defect rates. Guess which station they want focused on? Kieran watched Vance pick up a completed assembly and pretend to examine it. The unit was perfect. Kieran took pride in his work, but that wouldn't matter. Well. Vance held up the housing for nearby workers to see. Major defect here. Rick, what do you see? Rick squinted at the perfect unit. Circuit boards not seated right? Exactly. Vance slammed it down hard enough to damage it. Sloppy work costing thousands in returns. Dylan, mark critical failure. This was more than harassment. This was building a documented termination case. Now here's what happens, Mouse, Vance continued. You redo every unit you finished today, all 47. Stay until they're done right, even if it takes all night. Redoing 8 hours of perfect work would take past midnight, and he'd still need to return for regular shift. But protesting would give Vance more ammunition. Understood, Kieran said. As Vance walked away with his entourage, Kieran noticed Emma watching from quality control. Her face was flushed with anger, gripping inspection tools until knuckles went white. The next weeks blurred in escalating humiliation. Vance assigned broken equipment, then criticized repair time. He scheduled every holiday shift while giving favorites time off. When Kieran's productivity remained high despite sabotage, Vance grew more aggressive. The breaking point came Thursday afternoon when Vance decided to target Emma. Kieran was focused when raised voices drew attention to quality control. Vance stood over Emma's desk, face red with manufactured anger, while Rick and Dylan flanked him like bodyguards. What do you call this? Vance waved a clipboard in Emma's face. 3 units passed with obvious defects. Either you're incompetent or you're deliberately sabotaging standards. Emma's voice remained steady, but Kieran could see trembling hands. Those units met all specifications, Mr. Kruger. I checked twice. You checked twice? Vance's voice rose to a shout. Maybe your checking isn't worth a damn. Maybe we need someone who actually knows quality. Around the floor, workers had stopped to watch. This was different. Emma was well respected, known for competence and fairness, but she'd been kind to Kieran, and everyone knew it. I'd like you to shut your mouth and listen. Vance slammed his clipboard down, sending papers flying. You passed substandard work from your boyfriend Mouse, and now corporate's breathing down my neck. The accusation hung like smoke. Emma's face went pale, then flushed red. Workers exchanged glances, some shocked, others excited by drama. This gossip would spread through the plant like wildfire. That's not true, Emma said firmly. My inspections are based solely on technical specifications. Your inspections are based on who you're sleeping with, Vance's voice carried across the entire floor. Don't think I haven't noticed you making googly eyes at Mouse. Maybe you both need to find work elsewhere. Kieran felt something cold settle in his stomach. Vance wasn't just targeting him, he was destroying Emma's reputation to get at him. Workers whispered, spreading implications. By tomorrow, everyone would assume Emma was passing Kieran's work romantically. You can't talk to me like that. I'll file a complaint with HR, Emma said, standing slowly. Vance laughed harshly. Go ahead. Betty Morrison in HR is my sister-in-law. Good luck with that complaint. That's when Kieran felt his last restraint thread fray. Emma was being destroyed for showing him basic kindness. Her career, reputation, livelihood, all sacrificed to Vance's need for complete humiliation. He started to stand, but Emma caught his eye and shook her head almost imperceptibly. Don't make this worse. So Kieran forced himself down and watched Vance continue his assault. Tell you what, Vance said, voice dropping to something more dangerous than shouting. Since you're so close, maybe Mouse can help solve quality control problems. Rick, Dylan, collect every unit from Station 3 today. Emma's gonna re-inspect every single one while we watch. If even one fails, they both get written up for gross negligence. Rick and Dylan moved with eager bully efficiency. They swept through Assembly Line C, gathering Kieran's work with rough hands that sent units clattering. Workers watched silently as boxes were dumped unceremoniously on Emma's desk. Start inspecting, Vance commanded. Remember, one mistake from your boyfriend, and you're both out. Emma's hands shook slightly, picking up the first unit. Kieran knew his work was flawless, it always was, but Vance had authority to declare anything defective. This wasn't about quality control. It was about power, about breaking them both publicly. As Emma worked with Vance breathing down her neck, Kieran's mind drifted to a desert checkpoint outside Kandahar. He'd watched insurgents threaten a local translator who'd helped American forces. The translator had family, children, depending on him. Kieran had orders to observe only, gather intelligence without compromising position, but sometimes orders weren't enough. The memory sharpened focus on the present. Emma was almost finished. Every unit had passed. Vance was growing agitated, realizing his scheme wasn't working. That's when Kieran saw the supervisor palm something from his pocket, a small metal shaving that would constitute a defect if it ended up in the housings. Vance moved closer to Emma.